When Mark Thompson got a job at the factory, it wasn't a decision made out of dreams of a great career. It was a last resort. He was desperate. His savings were running out, bills kept coming in, and each day became more difficult. There were no job opportunities in his field, and continuing the search seemed increasingly absurd. The factory wasn't his choice, it was the only option. At first glance, the factory didn't seem old or decrepit. On the contrary, it looked quite modern. Mark thought it was just an ordinary gray building that produced goods for the heartless mechanisms of industry. But as soon as he walked inside, his perception changed dramatically. There were no dusty corridors or rusted machines as he had imagined. The production lines were modern, the lighting bright, and the air was clean. The building was relatively new, and the equipment was cutting edge. Everything seemed fine. The factory was efficient, almost sterile, as though it ran on an invisible thread of precision. Mark felt a strange sense of relief. It seemed that, finally, there was a beacon of stability in his life. He didn't expect grand plans or ambitious goals. He just wanted a normal life, stability, predictability. And here, at this factory, it seemed like he could find that. The factory wasn't just a place where machines worked on their own. It was a living organism with its own unwritten rules and culture. At first, people seemed friendly. They weren't overly familiar, but their smiles were sincere. Everyone knew their place, and their role was clear. The shifts passed without delays, and there was a kind of special harmony to the work, a rhythm that could be followed. During breaks, they gathered in the small cafeteria, talking about movies, news, sports. But Mark had trouble fitting in with the team. They accepted him, yes, but only over time. People weren't rude or hostile, but there was a certain distance. Everyone seemed to follow their routines and customs, but no one tried to go beyond the obligatory interactions. The factory was a place where everyone did their job, but no one questioned anything beyond that. But Mark had trouble fitting in with the team. They accepted him, yes, but only over time. People weren't rude or hostile, but there was a certain distance. Everyone seemed to follow their routines and customs, but no one tried to go beyond the obligatory interactions. The factory was a place where everyone did their job, but no one questioned anything beyond that. Over time, Mark started having a few conversations with colleagues. He began having lunch with James, the senior foreman, who was always polite, but rather reserved. At first, James seemed focused, always thinking about something, as though he was a few steps ahead. There was also Emily, a woman his age, with whom he occasionally talked about movies and life beyond the factory. The factory felt like a living organism, its machines, people, the rhythm of work. Days blended together, and Mark began to feel a strange comfort in this routine. Each day was like the one before. Wake up, go to work, return home. It was a cycle. And for Mark, the factory became his salvation. But something started to change, at first imperceptibly, and then more and more obviously. A few months passed, and Mark began to notice something strange. It wasn't something obvious, but it was oppressive. The people around him started changing, though he couldn't explain exactly what. At first, he thought it was just fatigue or stress, but it was something more, something that made the air feel heavier, something sinister. The workers continued doing their jobs, always on time, always accurately, but something about their faces seemed wrong. The smiles that once seemed sincere now appeared forced, and the spark, the human fire that Mark had always noticed in their eyes was gone. It was as though their expressions were frozen, like masks. It wasn't emptiness, it was horror, but it was hidden inside. In their eyes, there was frozen panic, as if their souls had been devoured by this place. Mark began to notice that this was happening not to one or two people, but to everyone. Their faces became like masks, showing no joy or fear, only emptiness, frozen like stone. The workers continued doing their jobs, but they looked like automatons, performing a program without feeling its meaning. Mark tried to talk to Emily. He asked her if she noticed that people were becoming strange. She looked at him for a long time and replied, "It's just the job, Mark. You'll get used to it." Her eyes were empty, as if everything alive had disappeared from them. Her smile was forced, and it made Mark feel a strange chill. With each passing day, he felt that he was changing too. He tried to suppress the fear, thinking it was just stress or anxiety. But the inner unease only grew stronger. He realized that this factory was taking something more than just his time and effort. He began to understand that this place doesn't give life, it takes it away. At some point, when everything seemed even more clouded, Mark came across an old computer in a corner of the warehouse. It was abandoned, covered in dust, but still working. Strange data flickered on the screen, as if someone long forgotten had tried to hide or record something. It was something completely unusual, and Mark felt that this old computer might be the key. He decided to check the information. Perhaps there was some machine or device here that sucked the life out of people. He spent nights at the computer, trying to decipher the data, looking for mentions of strange events at the factory. He thought it might be a mysterious machine, something mechanical or electrical, that drained souls, leaving people as empty shells. But the more he researched, the more he felt that he wasn't looking for what was really happening. It wasn't a machine. It was something more, something that happened inside the people themselves. And then, one late evening, it dawned on him. The factory didn't use a machine or device to drain souls. People were losing a piece of their souls every day, with each hour, with each movement. One evening, on his way home, he stopped in front of a store window and looked at his reflection. This wasn't the face he knew. It was a strange face, a face that had once been his, but was now different. His eyes were empty. His smile, when he tried to put it on, looked like a mask worn on him. Panic overtook him, but it passed quickly. He realized that the factory wasn't just a workplace. It was a system that devoured and destroyed people. He had become part of this system. He couldn't understand when it happened. He had become one of those he might have once felt pity for. Lying in bed at night, Mark realized that the factory had become more than just a place of work. It was a machine that devoured souls. He wasn't just working at the factory. He had become part of it, absorbed into its system. The factory had taken his dreams, his humanity, and now he didn't know where the factory ended and where he began. He had grown up in a way he hadn't expected. He thought the factory would give him stability, but he had become part of it. It was a consumption. And then, worst of all, he realized that there wasn't any creature or machine that was taking his humanity. He had simply grown up. He had become part of the system.